What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. In today's episode, I'm going to be starting a little 5-part series here where I'm going to be breaking down each of the Power 5 conferences, specifically focusing on the dark horse teams. I'm probably going to narrow down on 2 in each conference. I'm going to be doing that for the ACC in this first video, but might just select one for a couple of the conferences. And what I'm going to be doing with this is I'm going to be looking at the teams that I think have the best chance, not necessarily to win the conference straight up, because some of these conferences, let's just be real, there's one, maybe a couple, maybe as many as 3 teams that are the favorites. You know, there's plenty of stuff out that you could see about those teams. But in these videos, again, it's going to be a 5-part series. I'm going to be breaking down some of the teams that are dark horse contenders that could be something like a TCU, a team that comes kind of out of nowhere and maybe not reaches the college football playoff, but maybe makes a 4 or 5 game jump, 6 game jump even potentially for a team. And so I'm going to get started again in the ACC. If you go on to enjoy this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like this. Without further ado, let's dive into the ACC's dark horse contenders. The most electrifying environments, the most passionate fan bases, the traditions we hold dear, the tailgates we wake up early for, the memories we make, the rivals we hate, and the losses we try to forget. This is college football. So starting out with the top team, I think the Duke Blue Devils are kind of the darling dark horse contender in the ACC. If there's any team that fits this billing in the conference of being on the outside looking in, it's Duke. You've got the favorites, which are Florida State and Clemson. I dove into Florida State specifically, kind of along with USC, in a previous video on the channel that I'll either link below or pop up here on the screen, whatever. And so that took a look at them. You've obviously got Clemson, a team that has fallen a little bit. It's not like they've fallen on really hard times by any means, but they've fallen from being a regular team in the college football playoff. And then North Carolina, I think, would be on a little bit on the outside looking in, but I think they have the best realistic shot to win the conference outside of those top 2 teams, with Drake May, really a Heisman contender this year, leading the Tar Heels offense. But again, I'm going to go over the Duke Blue Devils, and then I'm going to give the second team. At the end of this video, I'll also name a couple of teams that I think are also potential dark horse teams. But the Blue Devils, they've got their quarterback coming back. That's Riley Leonard, who put up some solid numbers for the Blue Devils last year. I'll probably pop those up on the screen right now. They also bring back experience with their starting running back, Jordan Waters, and then their top 3 wide receivers, which are Eli Pancol, Jalen Calhoun, Jordan Moore, and they even bring back their starting tight end, which is Nicky Dalmolin. They only bring back 2 starters on the offensive line, so certainly kind of shifting gears, moving some pieces around there. Got some moving parts on the line, but they do bring in Jake Hornibrook, a graduate transfer from Stanford, who can bring in some added experience. It's not like he's coming in from a school that's had recent success on the football field, but sometimes a lineman can only do so much to really, especially one lineman by himself, can only do so much to really impact a game. But when you add him as a piece to a solid core of an offensive line, it could be the thing that takes this Duke offense to another level. And they were already pretty solid last year. They ranked 31st in FBS in scoring offense. They were also 39th in rushing yards per game and 43rd in total offense, down at 67th in passing yards per game. So the Blue Devils have pieces on offense. They were somewhat middle of the road, kind of a little bit more towards that higher end, but certainly, again, kind of middle of the road on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they made incredible strides forwards last year. When I looked at this number, I was like, wow, didn't realize. Obviously, I think they jumped from 3 wins to 9 last year. So again, they're certainly, I don't know how well they fit this bill of dark horse the way that I'm kind of defining it, but they are, again, outside that upper echelon of teams in the ACC, just outside of it. They have a good schedule. They play at North Carolina, and that's definitely going to be a test November 11th, and they also play at Florida State October 21st, and potentially the biggest game for them to dictate whether they'll have a chance to really compete for the ACC championship, which is there's no more divisions, so it's just going to be the top 2 teams playing each other. If they can win Labor Day weekend, opening weekend at home against Clemson on Monday, on Labor Day actually, that could set the tone for their entire season. And part of what they'll need to do is obviously to play well on defense, and up front they are returning pretty much everybody. All 4 of their starters on the line: R.J. Obin, Jamian Franklin, Dwayne Carter, Vincent Anthony Jr., and then they also return linebacker Dorian Mossey along, and then in the other linebacker spot they have Trey Freeman, who's projected to start. He's a sophomore, not a returning starter. And so defensively, though, again, the progress that the Blue Devils made last year was huge. They have their starting safeties coming back, and they have a couple of cornerback transfers coming in to bolster the secondary a little bit. If those pieces can plug in well and can lead the Blue Devils defense to even higher levels that they were last year. Scoring defense, they ranked 31st. Rushing defense, 26th. Passing was certainly an issue. So bringing in a couple of cornerback transfers, they bring in Miles Jones from Texas A&M and Al Blades Jr. from Miami. So the veteran influence is something that can certainly help bolster the passing defense. And if they can figure that out, they were second best in the nation in turnover margin at plus 16. With turnover margin, year to year, going from one year to the next, it normally, when it's that high, you expect a little bit of a drop-off. But if they can keep forcing those turnovers at the pace that they did last year and at the same time protecting the ball on offense, this Duke team has a legitimate chance to compete in the ACC. It's certainly a tough challenge to open up against Clemson. They benefit from playing that at home and then playing the 2 teams that I would say are ahead of them in the ACC projections on the road, Florida State and North Carolina. If they can win 2 out of 3 of those games, they have a legitimate shot to compete at the college football playoff level, but they also play Notre Dame, NC State, who are a couple of the other opponents. At Louisville, following the Florida State game, is also a challenge. But even if they can win one of those 3 games against Clemson, Florida State, and North Carolina, I think they would have a really legitimate chance to play in the ACC championship game. So if I were to predict their schedule, though, I would say they are able to win one of those 3 games. I do think they probably drop another. So I'm giving the Duke Blue Devils a 9-3 record. I think the 3 teams ahead of them will probably outpace them and will have more wins in the conference. But Duke, I expect to carry on the level of success that they had last year. And here though, is where the true definition of a dark horse, I think, comes into play. And that is Syracuse, the Orange. I think they have a legitimate chance to compete for the ACC title, and there's a few reasons why. Number 1, a start doesn't dictate necessarily how good a team is. Sometimes it can be because of a relatively easy schedule, which they certainly had. 5 of their first 6 games were at home, and they started 6-0. So that definitely, disclaimer there, that definitely helped them out. But something that happened to the Orange last year is they battled a lot of injuries, and after a 27-21 loss at Clemson, which first of all is a pretty good loss. You want to win every game, but that's a good loss to have. They ended up, each game after that, they lost by at least 10 points, aside from the bowl game against Minnesota. They lost by 8. So definitely kind of pieces fell apart there at the end of the season for the Orange, but I think they have good production returning. And if they can stay healthy, I think they have a chance to compete in the ACC. Garrett Schrader returns at quarterback. He was part of leading the passing attack that jumped from 152 yards per game to 232 even while they had a talented running back in Sean Tucker, who was obviously getting the rock a lot during the game. He's now on to, I believe, the NFL. He's certainly, gone to graduation. Schrader returns his top target, tight end Orande Gadsden II, and then he also returns another starter at receiver, Damian Alford. Just two starters return on the offensive line, so that certainly is something to keep an eye on, especially early on. They have a fairly easy start to the season, though. They host Colgate, Western Michigan, at Purdue, home against Army, home against Clemson, and they have probably the toughest 3-game stretch in the conference. They host Clemson, at North Carolina, at Florida State, 3 straight weeks from September 30th, October 7th, October 14th. So that's navigating that stretch will be tough. And I would expect them to lose all 3 games, but if they can steal any of those, I think they have a good shot to be a 3-loss team heading into kind of the final week of the season when they'll host Wake Forest. They've got a game against Pitt. I'm not really going to touch on the Panthers in this video. I think they're another one of the teams on the outside looking in, along with Miami. I think those 2 teams are just maybe missing some of the pieces and maybe are also a little bit more. I mean, Miami always receives hype no matter how good or bad they are. And Pitt, I would say, also fits this bill. They're returning a lot of starters, a lot of production. But I think Syracuse, and when you're making this sort of video, you have to go a little bit out there. I think the Orange are a team that could see 7 wins jump to potentially 10 when it's all said and done. So this isn't quite, in this conference at least. I think there's a couple of other conferences that maybe there will be teams that I can isolate a little bit more that'll make massive strides. But just rounding out the defense, they bring back their leading tackler, Marlon Wax, at linebacker. They have a couple of guys on the defensive line that come back. They run a 3-3-5 defense. They're bringing in Rocky Long, who specializes in that defense. And so Syracuse, they'll have to answer questions in the secondary, but overall they had the top number 3 defense in the ACC, and they were among the top 20 in a couple of categories in passing defense and total yards per game allowed. And so Syracuse, I do think, has a chance to make that jump. They're probably right around, somewhere between 8th and maybe like 11th in ACC preseason rankings, the preseason standings. And I think out of the teams that are there in the bottom half of the ACC, I think they have the best chance to maybe leapfrog a team like a Duke that I talked about earlier in this video, or North Carolina. If they can upset the Tar Heels on the road, maybe they can shock Clemson, carry some momentum, and shock North Carolina, and then they go into that Florida State game, potentially undefeated. I think going into that game, if they can somehow stay undefeated going into that, they would be 6-0. Yeah. So if they can carry that momentum, if they can grab a couple of upsets, who knows? They did start 6-0 last year. They had an easier schedule, but I do think the Orange have a chance to make a move in the ACC. The thing with Dark Horse, you're either going to be right and you're going to look real smart, or you're going to look real dumb. But I imagine people who would have predicted TCU to even be among the top 2 teams in the Big 12, or even probably like top 4, people would have said that people were crazy for predicting that, and I don't think anybody did last year aside from people in Fort Worth. But let me know your thoughts on the ACC. Let me know if you think either one of Duke or Syracuse have a legitimate chance to make a move towards the top of the ACC, or if you think it's just going to be Florida State and Clemson, maybe North Carolina the whole way. But if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Without further ado, this is Peter Burtnett, College Football Talk, signing out. Peace.